All right, guys, we are live, and I wanted to share some really cool things with you guys that we went over from this last weekend, and it was really kind of cool stuff. I actually posted a video from this last week, and it was an interview with Robert Kennedy Jr., and he was talking about all kinds of different things, but he was talking about our general health, he was talking about vaccines, and kind of telling his story, and it was really fascinating. And I wanted to, he talked about this thing called pathogenic priming, and I wanted to share this with you guys, because I know a lot of people haven't heard of that, and they're not familiar with that, and everybody, especially nowadays, they're waiting to hear from vaccines, and we're rushing through to get this vaccine approved. And it's a very interesting story and things that you really want to be aware of. And so kind of Robert, what I love about him, obviously, he's not, I don't know how to put it. He's not an anti-vax guy. He's just a researcher. Actually, where he started, it was kind of amazing. His whole thing was about mercury in fish. And so he was trying to, keep moms healthy and kids healthy and families healthy and all of the mercury in the fish, realizing how sick that was making everybody. And he kept having all these moms come up saying, that their kids were injured from vaccines, and there's mercury in vaccines, and you need to look into this, and you need to look into this. And so, he did everything he could to kind of put it off and avoid it. And it was kind of interesting with his connections. Obviously, they know all of the top researchers. They know all the top government people. And I thought it was a really funny quote he had in the interview. He said, he talked to the very top vaccine expert guy. And he was like, mercury causes all of these problems in kids. Why is it that we have to have mercury in vaccines to make them last and do it? I mean, and he said it was really funny. He said the guy basically said, oh, well, there's two types of mercury, and the type of mercury that we put in vaccines goes through the system and it's not absorbed. And I thought it was funny. He said, the quote he said is, I realized at that time that this top vaccine guy, he had an issue with the periodic table of elements, because there's only one mercury, and mercury is never good for us. And that's how he kind of got into this vaccine thing. But, he was asked about, concerns with the upcoming vaccine for coronavirus and all those kind of things. And what he talked about, he said, if you talk to any virologist, somebody that studies viruses, he said, the immunity that you get from a disease is much more enduring, much more robust, much more durable, and a much broader spectrum. Meaning, if you get a vaccine, it may protect you from one or two strains. If you catch the flu, it's going to protect you from the next pandemic flu that comes around. You're going to be protected from a lot of different strains. And that's what, Dr. Flynn always talks about, is that our immune system is strengthened when we use it. By exposure is how our immune system becomes strong. And a lot of times catching a disease, by catching the flu could protect you from cancer down the road. I mean, there's so many things in immunology that we don't understand, but they find that all the time. And then he talked about this thing called pathogenic priming, and it was absolutely fascinating. And he was talking about how it started back in 2002. So there was a coronavirus, a SARS epidemic at that time. And so a whole coalition of nations got together. They spent billions of dollars to come up with a vaccine. And so they took there was 35 different vaccines. And so they took the best of the best. They took the top four and they tested them. And interestingly enough, they tested for upper respiratory. This is kind of interesting, but the animal that is most like humans are ferrets. And so they tested it on ferrets. And what they found is they got absolutely amazing antibody response. And so a great antibody response is all that is needed. That's the metric that they use to license a vaccine. It's not about whether it works when you come in contact with the virus or not. It's just if they can produce antibodies, they consider that a success. And so they thought they hit the jackpot. Every single one of the ferrets had an amazing antibody response. Well, then they challenged them, meaning they exposed them to the actual virus, and every single one of the ferrets died. Every one of them. And the ones that were unvaccinated didn't die. And so they reminded them back in the 1960s, there was a MERS vaccine that they developed for children. And so what they did was they skipped the animal trials. They gave it to like 35 kids. Same thing. They had a great antibody response. But then when they challenged the kids, they just got horrendously sick, and 2 of them actually died. And so what they found is, like with the coronavirus, they said, like, if you're exposed through a vaccine, it's like it primes your system to get much sicker. It basically destroys your lungs. He said there was a similar thing in 2014. The NIH had a dengue vaccine that they created, and they saw those pathogenic priming signals, and they ignored it, and they gave it to like hundreds of thousands of kids in the Philippines. And they said, the kids were devastated when they actually were exposed to the virus. They said like 600 kids died, and there's all kinds of criminal trials that are going on right now. And so he said, in essence, what happens? He's like, there's 2 different types of antibody responses that you can have. There's the natural response that you get, which is neutralizing. He said, but there's also one that's kind of like a binding type response. And so it's like if you're vaccinated against the coronavirus, it almost acts like Velcro on the receptors in your lungs. And so the virus sticks to it, and you may get a much more terrible case of it and a much more robust case. And so you may not want to have those antibodies the next time it comes around. And so that's a lot of the concern with, the top docs, Paul Offit, Dr. Fauci. They're concerned about, long-term protection and that it doesn't kill you or doesn't make you sicker. And so those are some of the things just to be aware of that can happen with vaccines. That's the thing is, his ultimate answer was, really it's about building your immune response. It's about trying to stay healthy. That's what we've always been about. We had a patient this last week that when we had tested him previously, his white blood cell count was really low, which those are your immune cells. So he was very susceptible to infection and other issues. We did some things to help, heal his gut and to basically enhance his immune system or get it to function better, to make it more, to help restore that. And, retested him and everything's great. He doesn't have to worry. And so if you are concerned about coronavirus, if you're concerned about the future and your health, man, we can test it. You don't have to live in fear. That's something that you absolutely can know where you stand. You can know if your immune system's strong or if you need to be concerned and worried and doing things about that. So, this is what we do at The Wellness Way. Our motto is we don't guess, we test. And if you guys want to know more, if you guys like this video, please comment on it and be sure and like it and share it with your friends. If you want to know more about what we do and how we can help. Now, I'm actually doing a free webinar tomorrow night. I put the link in here. But basically, teach you the kind of the wellness way approach to inflammation. Most disease starts with inflammation, and we'll talk about how we address it, how we recognize it, how we measure that, and then how we go about helping you not to just manipulate your health, which is what medicine is all about. Medicine is about manipulation, and we'd rather try to restore it. And so it's all about restoration. So, hey, I appreciate you guys being on here. Again, please like and share this, and appreciate you following us, and we'll talk to you soon.